Florida's multi-billion-dollar emergency fund is at the center of an intensifying debate in Tallahassee. Lawmakers are asking how state emergency powers and tax dollars are used for immigration enforcement. A review by the Miami Herald found the DeSantis administration spent roughly $573 million over 3 years on immigration enforcement. That includes detention centers like the so-called Alligator Alcatraz and Deportation Depot in Baker County. That report follows a January court ruling in a public records case. In that case, the judge ordered the Florida Division of Emergency Management release records showing how more than $405 million were spent in just 6 months on immigration-related costs. Now, in response to that, the State House lawmakers proposed limiting the emergency fund to only use during natural disasters, but that provision was stripped this week after pushback from the DeSantis administration and its allies. At one point, the state attorney, James Uthmeyer, calling it a moronic idea. Victor, I'd like to start with you. How do you see the back and forth? One day, they had unanimous approval in the House by Republicans and Democrats, and then the next day, they took the teeth out of that bill. They took it out.
Well, you know, in Tallahassee, you know, it's like making sausage and meat. It's a mess up there. And I as someone who worked in the legislature, worked in the governor's office, and also worked as a lobbyist, and I still do, it's a very difficult process. There's a lot of horse trading going on. So the horse trading that went on that got all the Democrats on board was the provision that said, hey, by the way, we'll do what this. It's great for natural disasters, but this boondoggle $500 million that they spent on the Alligator Alcatraz has been a disaster because, frankly, we haven't really figured out exactly who's going to pay that $500 million. You know, they lied to a federal judge when they went in and said when they tried to stop it based on the environmental impact. And the hook was that they said, well, no, it was really we're not going to go after federal funds. Well, they knew daggum well that they were going to go after federal funds, because that's how they sold it.
And the federal lawsuit that you're referring to was filed in June, right after James Uthmeyer announced the establishment of Alligator Alcatraz as a detention center. The Miccosukee tribe, the Friends of the Everglades, they filed the federal lawsuit asking for information to make sure that the environmental studies were done as required by the National Preservation Policy Act, right? And so all of the information in that case really revealed a lot of the things that we're seeing now. But one interesting point was that the state representative said that Federal Policy Act did not apply because no federal funds were being used for this. We have looked over the numbers. Travis, I'd like to ask you, you know, as a fiscal conservative, what are your concerns when you see the amounts that have been spent on the establishing and operating of Alligator Alcatraz?
Always fiscal concerns, whether it's my party making sausage up there or the former party that was making sausage up there before us. You know, I'm not sure who argued that case before the federal court. Was that Uthmeyer? Because you know, you would think that the AG would know that then they were going to change the tune about whether there was going to be a environmental study done. So I'm not entirely certain about that, but I can tell you that, look, ultimately the goal is safe streets, right? And we all agree on that. The spending, I don't want out of control spending for theatrics. I really don't. I don't think anyone does, Republican or Democrat wants to see that. So I thought it was a great idea that the state was helping out the feds, and I also don't want, if the federal government promises to help us on the price tag, I don't want to be on the hook for it either. If we're taking in illegals and we're taking on this big cost, I want Floridians to be reimbursed. So there's a lot to it. Some of the numbers do seem exorbitant for the numbers of people who were detained and housed in those facilities. And so, yeah, that's concerning for me as a conservative Republican. Yes.
But the thing is, ICE enforcement is a federal responsibility. Why are we spending $500 million of Florida taxpayer money that could go for schools?
Look, I do like to see local and state authorities participating, and when it comes time to incarceration for illegals.
The federal government right now is looking at buying these massive warehouses around the country and spending billions of dollars to do it to house the immigration detainees. This is all about
problem created for us by Democrats.
No. This
Well,
is about Ron DeSantis running for president. He wanted to be a big show horse about it. So look at me, I got alligator Alcatraz, and it made national news about it.
As we look
It made for a great T-shirt.
As we look at what's happening in the legislature during this regular session on this topic, you know, the whole question about transparency comes in. Camille, where do you see this going in terms of transparency on this?
Well, you know, I'll say as a journalist, I think it's important in our roles and for the people in the state of Florida to be transparent about what's going on here. There's a lot of numbers that are getting thrown around, there's a lot of information, and I think that people are confused as to sort of what the next steps are going to be and what it means for their wallets, especially during a time where a lot of people have lost their jobs. And sort of to your point, with schools and that sort of thing, that could use some of the money that is being sort of pushed into different directions at some of these detention centers that might be built around the country. So there will be a lot of discussions about what are some of the best ways to use this money and what this means for the average taxpayer.